Hey everybody, Tom Henderson, the founder of RESGEN here, and I want to welcome you to another episode of RESGEN's Giving Life podcast. Stories and conversations about life in Christ, everyday discipleship, and exploring ways that we as men can give life to others. I'm excited about today's show, but before we get into it, I want to real quick tell you about a new discipleship resource that is available to you, the RESGEN family. RESGEN is partnered with Right Now Media, a website and app containing a huge library of discipleship videos and resources for men, marriage, parenting, and more. And you have free access to it all. Seriously, there are literally thousands of video devotionals and Bible study series for you to use in your life groups, with your families, and personally. You can sign up for your free account by visiting resgen.org and clicking on the resources tab on the top of the page. All right, now that we've got that taken care of, it's time for me to introduce you to today's guest. Jason VanRuler is a counselor, coach, and speaker who owns Solomon Recovery, a private practice specializing in the treatment of intimacy, trauma, and transitional concerns. In addition to counseling, Jason has been coaching clients since 2013 with a special focus on personal growth, relational issues, and executive entrepreneurial startups. On today's show, Jason and I discuss a number of topics, including the most common relational issues couples are facing today and how to overcome them, how we can build resiliency in our kids so that they're better prepared for being an adult, and how we can take care of our mental health in a world that is filled with so much negativity and strife. I'm really glad that you're tuning in today. Here's my conversation with Jason VanRuler. Jason, thanks for coming by the podcast today, my friend.
Yeah, I'm excited. Ever since we've been talking about this, I've been looking forward to it.
Yeah, it's very good. Well, I gave our audience a little rundown as to who you are and, I mean, the role that you play in your life and the few different hats that you wear. But before we get into all that, let's just quick introduce you to the audience just from who you are, your family, and then we'll kind of go from there.
Yeah. So South Dakota guy, Sioux Falls guy. I'm a counselor here. So I've got a practice called Solomon Recovery. Yep. So I do that as a career. Also do some speaking, some writing, and some stuff on social media lately.
Yeah.
Married for 15 years this year. And then I have 3 kids as well.
Okay. Age range is?
We go from 6 to 11.
Okay. Man, busy.
Yeah, I'm sleeping a little better at night, but not much.
Right.
It's a little better.
And as they approach the teen years, you will again start to wonder just when they're going to sleep again as they operate in different times and you're wondering when are they coming home and all that kind of thing. So, all right. So you've mentioned that you've been, that you're a counselor in addition to, we talked on the intro, I talked about life coaching and all that. We're going to get into all that today. But I do want to know, like, how did you first, become a counselor? Like who or what influenced you to go into that line of work? Because counselors, of course, they have to be very good at listening. They have to care for people. And it's a lot of just focusing on other people. Mm-hmm. So has that just always been a part of your personality, or how did you get into this whole counseling world?
Yeah, let's see. So ever since I've been a kid, I love wearing corduroy pants and sweaters. And so I feel like since I was 8, I've been kind of cut out for this role. And now I just fit it. No, right. I actually, when I was a kid, I wanted to be a psychologist, and then I wanted to be an artist, and then I wanted to be all these things. So it wasn't like a lifelong thing. And then I started out in the business world as a recruiter. And so I really liked that, helping find jobs for people. But what I found in that process is so many people had other stuff going on that was the reason they were switching jobs. And so I got really, really interested in what are the people dealing with? The job part is cool and it's great to make placements, but what about the people? And I kind of realized again that dream of mine to help people as a full-time job.
Wow. Okay. And so right out of the box, did you say, I'm going to start my own thing? And Solomon's Recovery, that sounds like a pretty good name. I mean, so.
Yeah, I don't really know how that all happened. Okay. So I was working, I had not finished my undergrad. I did the 10-year program, I always joke, because I dropped out, went back. But I was working at a staffing company and owning my own recruiting company. And I just said I'm going to go back to school. And I was like, oh, this sounds cool. We're going to have a lot of debt. And I just can't wait for this to happen. And so finished my undergrad, went to the seminary for my master's. And then I was like, I think I should get another master's degree. And my wife's like, why stop now? Like, we've given every other university money. So I got another master's degree. And then I was like, I should start my own practice. And she's like, right, start your own practice. And so really from the start, I've been a private practice guy. I worked at the hospital for a bit, but it was just kind of on my heart to have a place where people could come and feel like it was a home to them. And so, yeah, I've kind of done that my whole career.
Okay. And so with Solomon Recovery, so where does that name come from?
Yeah, well, I'm a faith guy, so there's this guy Solomon, and it seemed like he could have used some recovery. And so for me, it just kind of made sense as a reminder to me every day of just like we can have great wisdom and still make mistakes and need help. And so that's kind of where that name came from.
Oh man, I really like that. When we first met one another and just. I don't know. I had a great time just when we first connected over bagels and so forth. But I never asked that question as to where the name comes from. But I love that because, just because you have wisdom, just because we're intelligent human beings, that we're all going to make mistakes.
Right.
And we're all going to need help at one time or another in one way or another. And I think, what a great truth just to kind of get out on the table here right at the beginning of our conversation of saying, regardless of who we are, we're going to make some mistakes in life.
Right. It's going to be part of it.
Yep. And hopefully we learn from those mistakes. We learn from some of our failures, right? And look at what Scripture says. For all have sinned and fallen short of God's glorious standard, but we're also we're going to make some mistakes.
Right.
And that doesn't mean that we can't recover from them.
Right.
And so you're in the business of trying to help people do that.
That's my goal.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So then what are some of the more common, I guess, for lack of better words, issues, some of the more common issues that are kind of being brought to you, with where our world is at, especially from men?
Yeah. So I do a lot of couples counseling. And so I'll do counseling with couples who have maybe had infidelity. That is a big thing. Also, just couples that aren't on the same team anymore. They maybe started out on the same team, but they've had kids or they have businesses or things that get in the way and they're distracting. And so what I'm seeing now with like COVID and the pandemic is you have to actually have a relationship. And so whereas we might have been able to kind of run away sometimes from our problems, that's become really challenging, right? So you're like, well, I'm going to run away from you to the basement.
Yeah.
And that just doesn't carry the same as going some other place. And so couples now more than ever, I think, are just seeing the importance of like the soundness in a relationship and being on the same team. But they don't always know how to do that. And what's true is that a lot of us come from families where we actually didn't have that role model.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like we're trying to put this all together with no instructions. And what's cool is people are asking for help, but they're like, we don't know how to do this, and we want to.
Okay. So you talked about how a lot of, would you say that on percentage end, so a large percentage of what you're doing in the counseling realm is with couples more than individuals?
Well, I would say it's about split.
Okay.
Yeah. So I do a lot of couples, but then I do a lot of work with men who are just trying to be better, right? So maybe they've had infidelity, or maybe they are just trying to better relationships. I work a lot with executives and people who seemingly have everything, but not what they need. And so we're kind of having to refine, like, if I get everything I want, that's great, but I still have needs, and what about those? And those are often interpersonal, and sometimes those are the scariest things. Sometimes it's easy to make a lot of money, but it's hard to actually connect with someone.
Yeah. And is that not getting what they need, like they don't feel that they're of value or of worth or fulfilling their purpose in life?
All of the above. Yeah. Yeah. I think there's an old model for what we're supposed to do as men. And that doesn't always serve us anymore. And so I think sometimes we adhere to that and we try to find success, and we might have financial success or work success, but that doesn't always feel successful to us. And so where I come in is helping men kind of figure out, like, what is success really? And if we're thinking in legacy terms, what does that look like to our families?
Yeah. Okay, so Jason, let's just have a little session here right now.
Okay.
That sounds fun. I don't know, but so I don't feel successful. Let's say I'm struggling. Like, boy, I have attained. People know my name. I have plenty of money. I've risen to whatever, top of whatever company, but I don't feel successful. So Jason, what is success?
Yeah. Well, that's actually not something I can define for you, right? So the great thing is that we all define that differently. And oftentimes what happens is that we kind of take on somebody else's idea of success and we buy into that. And that's when we find ourselves really disappointed. As we say, all right, I followed all the rules. Now here I am, but it doesn't feel like it's supposed to. And I think that's because each of us has a different idea of how it's supposed to look or what we actually need. For me, being successful, there could be fame and money would be really fantastic. But what's more important to me is to be a good dad. Because as a kid, my dad wasn't real present. And so I always wanted to just be a good dad to my kids. So that's success for me. So you could find me with a ton of money and stuff, but I still wouldn't feel it if I wasn't feeling like a good father. And so the first step is kind of identifying like what even matters to you.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned that you're a faith guy, and I know that you're a follower of Christ, and that your faith is very important to you, and leading your family and building a household of faith and all of that kind of thing. But so where does faith come into the conversation in a counseling sense? Because for me, if you'd say, "Hey, Tom, how do you define success?" Well, to me, it would be that where I'm loving Jesus with my whole heart, mind, soul, and strength. Then I'm striving to become more and more like Him every day, and that I'm doing the best I can to then have that turn into being a better husband and more engaged father. And I believe that as men, as if we are conformed more into the likeness of Christ, we will have better marriages.
Yeah,
we will have more engaged dads. We will have better community leaders and servants out in the community. So what role does faith play in the counseling realm?
Yeah, so I think the faith conversation can be tricky, right? Not everyone wants to have that conversation. So I think as a therapist or counselor, I just meet people where they're at. But that's part of the conversation. Even if that's not something you want to talk about, then I would say that's something we need to talk about, right? So why do we not want to talk about that? Or why is that not part of it? I look through basically all of what I do through that lens. So I can't help not do that, but I can help not talk about it if it makes someone uncomfortable.
Okay.
But to me, that's just how I view the world, right? Is through that faith lens. But I find with fulfillment and people kind of finding success, that is an important conversation because there's something there. And for some people, it's everything. And other people, they say, like, I would just hope to push that to the side. And I respect wherever they're at.
Right. And a lot of times I think that, especially if, we've been raised in faith or in the church and all that, we can somehow, and I don't mean this in a bad way, but where faith becomes so much the focus, where it's just like, well, you know what, if I just would have trusted God more, right. Or if, God doesn't give me anything more than I can handle, which is one that the Christians love to say, right? Yep. But there is something to say that faith and then what's going on interpersonally, that those can coincide.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yep.
And sometimes we have to understand that it's not just about the faith. I mean, our faith is of crucial importance. I mean,
super important.
And anybody that knows you and I, they would say that they know how important it is to us. But sometimes there's other stuff going on that needs to be talked about and taken care of.
And we need to take action, right? So it's just as important, but we need to take action and have a role too. And so, I think that whole, pray harder, work hard, like there's truth to it. Having strong faith is super important, but that's not always the only thing. We got to kind of look at it in a little more robust way.
Right. So let's just say you've got a married couple that comes in, and something that I've heard, especially the longer you're married, your kids maybe have moved on. They're no longer in the house.
Sure.
I don't know if there's any merit or value to this or merit to this statement, but I've always heard like the second highest rate of divorce is about year 20 after the kids have, they're empty nesters now. And then they're like, well, who are you? We're not going to games anymore. We've been so focused on the kids or whatever. But the statement that they make is, we just kind of fell out of love.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you've probably heard that statement a time or two, in your office. So what is some of the things that you talk about with couples that are experiencing some of those types of feelings or lack of feeling?
Yeah. Yeah. So I think we just kind of go to, what are you doing to stay in love? Right. So he's like, well, we don't do anything together, but we're not in love. That makes a lot of sense. Like, I'm not really surprised by that, right?
Yeah.
So we'll kind of go through, there's different types of intimacy. There's physical intimacy, which is always our favorite to talk about, but there's also experiential and faith and creativity. And so I'll say, like, what are you guys doing together? And if you're not doing anything together, how are you supposed to be in love? It's really tricky. So when people say we've fallen out of love, I respect that. And yet at the same time, I say, well, like, I don't know if that's the only thing keeping you in the marriage is you falling out of love. Like, it takes some work and effort. That's marriage. And so what can we do to get you back there?
Yeah. And then as far as like how faith works into that, where then couples say, well, we're staying together because we know that we're told that divorce is wrong. You know, or we've been told that, here's the reasons that, Scripture says that divorce can happen, and none of those has happened. So, but there's an active piece of that, like you just talked about, that you have to take some action in there.
Right.
So in situations like that, with couples that are really feeling those types of things, like we're only together because the Lord says we're together, or that or because we're staying together for the kids, and I know that I'm sure we have some listeners that are maybe even feeling some of those kinds of feelings right now. What's some of the advice that you give to couples that find themselves in that kind of a situation?
Yeah, so I think if you've decided to stay together for whatever reason, so that's a faith reason, and you're like, hey, we just, we can't seem to find a way out of this, when we look at Scripture, then I guess you're staying, so you might as well do the work, right? So when couples say that to me, I just say, okay, great, so that means you're sticking around. And they're like, well, I guess. And I say, okay, cool, let's do the work then. So if you're staying, that's actually like a wonderful thing, because then we take the uncertainty out and we say we can try some things. We can experiment a little. But I think also it's hard to have connection with somebody if they're saying, like, I would divorce you if I could find a way. That doesn't really like give me the warm and fuzzies, right? If I go home tonight, my wife's like, hey, I'm only in this because I can't find a way to make it okay with God. I'm not asking her to dinner tomorrow night, right? And so I think we have to kind of look at, are we making it easy to have a close relationship? So I talk to people a lot about on-ramps. Are you giving them an on-ramp to the relationship you want? Probably not if you're telling somebody you'd like to divorce them and you can't figure out how to do it. So if you're going to stay, do the work.
And Jason, what about because I know that there's conversations that I've had with a number of guys where it feels like, I'm putting in all the work, or the gals will say, well, I'm doing all the work and he's not doing anything or she's not doing anything. Yeah. So are there some things that you can do to where it feels like, man, they're just like the one person's just not in it? I mean, they just don't seem to do it. And I know we're not going to solve all the crises.
Right now, I'm trying to. Yes,
I know we're not going to.
Yeah.
But I'm just trying to think of a lot of the conversations that I've heard and that I've had over the last couple of years.
Sure.
And even just getting to the point of where, and I want to get into this a little bit later on. Of a lot of times we feel like there's a stigma that comes with counseling.
Sure.
But it doesn't have to be that there's always an issue. But when there is an issue, like, what, I'm doing all the work, they're not doing anything. What do we do in that situation?
Yeah. So I think, I hear this one a lot, right?
Yeah.
And I think sometimes it's true. Often, though, what's true is that what you're doing is not actually valuable to the other person. And what they're doing is not valuable to you. So the thing is, most often people are doing things to try to help each other. But again, if it's not valuable to them, it doesn't really matter. So what I often find is that if you feel like you're doing all the work, the first question you need to ask is like, are they demanding that I do this? So is this their request? Are they saying, I want you to do all the work? Oftentimes they're not, right? So then why am I doing that? And what's true is that sometimes we overfunction because that feels safer than trusting someone and being let down. And so we say, like, if I just do all the work and I don't give you any room to do any, then you'll never let me down. I can complain about doing all the work, but I don't ever have to be rejected, right? Because if I trusted you, you might let me down. And so we got to kind of figure out, like, is this about me and something that I have a problem with or a wound over? Or is this about you not knowing what you need to do to help me? Or is it about you refusing? I think in most cases, people aren't refusing to do the work. not really sure what to do, or there's not space to do it.
So does that, I think about the book, The 5 Love Languages, where it's like, okay, so you got a primary and a secondary love language. For me, it's words of affirmation and acts of service. Okay. So, and Laura's is much more on quality time. And if I'm not feeling loved because I'm not maybe getting words of affirmation or having, acts of service, whatever that is. But she's like, well, yeah, but look at all the time I'm spending with you.
Right.
Not that I don't want that.
Yeah.
Not that,
it's important.
It's totally important or whatever, but that's not necessarily how I feel love.
Right.
But Jason, I will tell you, I love being with my wife, and it's good. We're going to be empty nesters here soon, and we're looking forward to just having more time together. But at the same time, so is that kind of what you're speaking of here a little bit?
Yep, exactly. And I think of it in terms of like currency, right? And so she may be giving you the currency that she uses, but you have to convert it, right? And so it's not like it has no value, but there's a process there, right? And so you say like, by the time I convert it, it's a lot of work. It just doesn't go as far as if you just gave me the currency that matters to me. And so we try to help couples like, what's his currency? What's your currency? And how do I give that to them? And make it really easy, and then eliminate the rest. So don't waste time on stuff that doesn't matter.
And in order for that to happen, though, like you both have to kind of go all in on that deal. I mean, you have to be willing to say, okay, look, I'm not going to try to pay with this kind of currency anymore because knowledge is power. And so now I know how to best care for you and how you feel loved or how you feel appreciated or how you feel like you're in it or whatever. But you got to be willing to do it then.
Yeah. And that takes some vulnerability, and that can be really scary. If we have a track record of getting hurt, we can say like, well, this feels risky. And it does, but the truth is the relationship we want is always over the side of vulnerability. We're going to have to do that if we get that relationship.
Okay, that's good. All right, I want to transition to another topic, but before I do, I just, and this is a big question, I realize, but what is some of the best advice that you give just to married couples in general? Like just a couple things that you say, boy, this is, if you do 1, 2, or 3 of these things, this is where to start.
Sure. Well, I'm a little worried to tell you because I don't want to be out of a job, but I will tell you this. I'm just kidding. I give this stuff away. I think the thing that I would say just first is be intentional. The thing is that a lot of people put more effort into running a business than their marriage, and the marriage is far more lasting and important. So be intentional about your relationship. I think also just keep it simple. Like I said, find out what works, do what works, and leave the rest. And then always just remember you're on the same team, or at least you're supposed to be. Because I think we forget that sometimes, and we start to do things that really aren't very great for our team. They're good for us, maybe. And so just kind of going back to like, are we acting like we're on the same team right now?
Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks for giving that. You might have one less counseling session out of that. So,
dang it.
So yes.
Okay. I'll live. I suppose.
All right. All right. So there's definitely been kind of I'd say an increase in just how much people are talking about things like depression, anxiety, specifically in like younger people.
Sure.
And more, medication and dealing with some of the struggles that students are having today. And I've worked with teenagers for over 20 years and I, hearing stories about what's going on in their lives and all of that. And so I'm thinking, I understand that there could be feelings of depression or anxiety that are going on and needing to measure up or try to attain value and performance or whatever. What are some things, because I know that especially as dads sometimes as our kids are hurting, as our kids are trying to work through their own things, we have a temptation to think like, well, okay, so I must not be a good dad, I must not be doing something right. But what are some of the things that maybe dads can do, or maybe some coaches, teachers, whatever? How do we help our kids just in their lives, but also in just kind of building in their resiliency and their reliance upon God, not recognizing that everything's going to be perfect,
right,
ever. But like, how do we help our kids today overcome obstacles in their life?
Yeah, I think we empower them. So we let them know we love them, and we empathize with them, and we can kind of have a conversation and reflect back to them that they're understood and they're seen. And then we encourage them to take steps. And so we can identify what those steps are, but let them know that they need to take them. So I think where we get sometimes off track is we try to do the steps for them. We just say, like, hey, you should do this, this, and this, and I'll do it for you. And then there's not really an investment on their behalf. And so I think the thing that we need to do is just say, like, trying to help them. And the best way to help them is to empower them to do the work on their own. I think if we do parenting really well, our kids grow up to be healthy humans who don't know everything, but they know how to ask for what they need. And so I think if we can kind of just say, like, I want to teach them to ask for what they need and then help them get that, that's kind of our stance. As fathers, though, I think we're just kind of responsible for everything. So we go, oh, they're struggling, that must be me. And I think, like that makes sense, but it's probably not so helpful to the kid because it makes it about you. Right? The last thing that kids often want is when they're struggling for you to tell them how you think you're a failure. Because again, they don't feel very seen or heard in that moment.
Oh yeah. Okay. That's good. That's good. Because it deflects the focus on them and then places it on us.
Right.
And then all of a sudden their issue seems smaller and then they are maybe more caring for the...
Yeah, they're caretaking for us. Oh, Dad, you're okay. And then it feels unsafe to keep having a conversation. So I think if you want to keep having those conversations, you're just willing to go to those tough places and say, like, I love you. I'm going to screw up and get it wrong, but I want to help you get to the place you need to be.
Yeah. So you said a statement there, Jason, I think that's really interesting, is you want to help them ask for what they need, which obviously that's a lot easier when the kids are younger.
Right.
But as they get older, if you haven't built open communication like that in your home from a foundational level, all of a sudden your kid's 12, your kid's 14, and that has not been the history of how it's been working in your home. So let's say someone wants to make a change in their home now and really say, okay, how do I help my teenager? How do I help just my kid in general figure out how to ask what they need now?
Yep.
Are there some tricks? Are there some things that we can do to help them understand that that's okay?
Yeah. I think we just get to know the kids, right? So, I mean, I think it's just relational. So we get to know them. We just kind of love them up, and we say, like, I want to be your person. I want to be here, and I care for you. And how do we figure this out? And we just problem solve together. It's kind of like doing a puzzle sitting at the same table. So we just say, like, yeah, I'm here for you. Let's figure this stuff out. But the truth is we'll do it wrong for years and years and then figure it out. So I think there's always going to be, I say this to clients all the time, no one comes to me to do it the right way. They come to me after they've done it the wrong way. And that's perfectly fine because that's exactly how I do it. And so you're not going to get it perfect and say, like, well, from the ground up, we built this thing perfectly. That's awesome. That's a whole different set of problems, by the way. But that's awesome. But it's probably not realistic. So just know, like, you can start any day just being a good person to them and caring about them. And when you care about them, you give them the confidence to try new things. And through trying new things, they figure out who they are.
I do need to ask you, so when you're having conversations with your wife and kids, do they often feel like they're stepping into like the counseling office?
They love it. Yeah, my wife actually, she loves when I go to therapist, Jason. The minute that I go like this and I go to the closet and put on my sweater, and she's just like, son of a gun.
You're so attractive now.
She's not a big fan. So I tried to bill her copay, it didn't work. But yeah, I mean, I think at my best self, if I can use these same things at home, it would be great. I don't know that I always do, but I try to.
Yeah. Isn't that, it's so, I just have to imagine, like, when people talk to you, they're like, okay, wait, did you just punch in? Like, I mean, because, but here's, I remember talking to, one of my best friends on the planet, he's a doctor, so I'll ask him some medical questions at times. I'll be like, man, dude, what do you think about this? And I'm like, I'm sorry. And he's like, dude, this is just what I do. This is what I love to do. And I'm very willing to kind of give advice and all this. And you don't need to apologize for that. And he goes, if someone comes and talks to you and says, hey, I'd like you to explain who Christ is on the street, would you be like, I'm not working right now,
Come back on Monday.
Come back on Monday or Sunday or whatever, right? But so I imagine, though, that, I mean, you just enjoy, it's what you got even into counseling for, was like, there's the stories behind the job change. There's the stories of these people that I can maybe help in a real and tangible way. And so, being able to bring that to a a home level. And sometimes the hardest advice to follow is your own.
Right. Absolutely. Yep. We've all been guilty of being, the plumber who's got broken plumbing at home. Yeah, this is true. Mm-hmm.
Right. And everyone probably looks and says, oh, well, your home must be perfect. Your marriage must be perfect because you give marriage advice and counseling. And your relationship with your kids must be great because you help build relational bonds in the office.
Right.
But yet there's still dynamics.
I'm still human.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's that part that gets in the way is I'm still human. So it's, you know the right things to do. You know where you want it to go. It just doesn't always go there.
Right.
And so I think like a thing that I talk to people a lot about is just we have two hands and one holds grace and one holds truth. And so I think, for me as a faith person, like that's biblical. And so I'm just trying to always hang on to, there's grace and truth. There's grace that I'm human. I'm going to screw it up. There's truth that I do know what I need to do. So I need to try to do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, that's good. All right. So it does seem like, and we just talked a little bit on the teenage end, but just mental health issues on the whole. Mm-hmm. And obviously there's varying levels of mental illness. And maybe before we even get into that, Jason, what is a good, for lack of better words, definition of mental illness? I mean, we hear that term a lot, and they must have mental health issues or something like that.
Right.
What is just kind of a working definition of what is mental illness? And then I want to get into maybe some of the ways that we can try to turn the tide of what we're hearing about, at least.
Right. Yeah. So I think mental illness, and I'll just be simplistic here, but I mean, I think it's a set of beliefs or thoughts that we have that get in the way of having our best life, right? And so that might come out as anxiety or depression, or even more severe things on the spectrum. But I think it's just a way of being and thinking that is not healthy for us.
Okay. Which I love that you put it in kind of simple terms because I'm a simple-minded human being.
I am too. Yeah, so I have to keep it simple. So there's no complicating to me. Okay, this is how this works.
So that's very helpful. So that's a great definition to work off of. So what societal changes? And I mean, this really kind of transfers from city to city. This isn't just like a Sioux Falls or Midwest thing. And
sure.
I mean, but what societal changes do we really, I think, need to focus on and kind of enact to kind of combat the mental health crisis that I think we have maybe a little bit more so now than at least that we're aware of more now, partially because of maybe, COVID stuff or, just a lot of the relational issues that we're having. But what kind of societal changes do you think we need to make? And I know it starts with us, but.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think we just don't have connection. I mean, that's the thing. And I'll tell people like my job could easily be replaced if people had friends. Because at the end of the day, so many people feel like they're the only ones struggling. And that's so challenging for me doing what I do to hear someone share something that is really big and important to them and then say, and I'm sure I'm the only one. And for me to go like, you're like the only one today, but this week, probably not. Right. Yeah. But the thing is, we're so disconnected. We don't know that. And so I think the first thing is we have to find a way to connect better. And I think we believed that social media was a way to do that. And I'm not so sure that that's actually been what's happened. And so people are just so hungry for connection and they feel so isolated. I think that's really fueling a lot of mental health problems. Also, there's not a whole lot of gratitude. Like there's really wonderful things going on, but it's not the stuff we typically talk about or think about. And so I think having that kind of pair of feeling isolated and alone and then not having a lot of gratitude makes us feel really like the world isn't a very good place.
So is the answer just...
You are asking me to solve the world's problems right now.
Right now. We're going to accomplish it all right now in this podcast.
You have incredible faith in me.
So like, I love the idea of yes, being more gratitude because it's more gracious and being filled with more gratitude because it's very difficult to grumble and be and be full of gratitude at the same time,
right.
And be thankful at the same time. But I think about the statement you just made about being connected and having true connection. Obviously, our connection to Christ of utmost importance, but our connection to other people. And men, a lot of times, I think, struggle with that.
Absolutely.
Maybe more than gals, just because, there is less vulnerability when it comes to men. I think it's getting better. I think there's much more, I think men are much more apt today to have connection with people and be able to say, hey, look, I'm really struggling in this area.
Yep.
But a lot of guys struggle in making friends. Why is that?
Because we're out of practice, right? I mean, I think a lot of us, we make good friends in school. And the reason we make good friends in school is because we have to go to school. And after that, everything else is optional. So if you ever think about it, like we make friends when we're kind of forced into an environment with other people. Then we get out of school and everything is up to us to do. And so if we're not intentional about that, we're not going to make friends. And so what happens is we kind of become the people who try once and then we try 6 months later and we say, well, I don't have a friendship. Well, of course not, because you need a lot of shared experiences. And so I think that's where we get in trouble is everything is optional, whereas it used to be less optional and you just had to go do some of these things and made friends as a byproduct.
So it's really starts with intentionality. Of course, when you are intentional and you try to step out, it also is going to take some courage.
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
You don't know what, they'll be like, no, I don't want to go to lunch with you, or I don't want to hang out, or no, I don't want to be your best friend, because you feel a little weird. Like, on a playground.
Yep.
It's, hey, do you want to play kickball or do whatever, and I was always one of the last people picked in kickball, by the way.
Okay.
So yeah, I probably need some counseling just for the mental struggles I have just in being the last one picked all the time. But at any rate, but it was kind of that shared experience. But it's now even maybe a little bit more awkward to kind of put yourself out there.
Right.
So if that's the case, and I 100%. Concur with what you're saying, because one of the things that I get after our men's summit on the surveys is in ways to pray for guys or whatever is I need some other dudes in my life.
Yep, absolutely.
I need some other guys in my life that I can have friends so I don't have to feel alone. And so how can we encourage guys and saying, yes, it's one thing to say go be intentional and try to find friends,
right?
But what would you say to just guys that just really kind of struggle in that relationship area? Because I agree with you that one of the things that men especially, they do feel lonely and they feel like they're on an island. They go to work, they're trying to be a good husband, they're trying to take care of their kids, but yet they're lonely. So what?
Yeah, absolutely. That happens. Yeah. So what I often recommend is finding something you're interested in that has a scheduled event like every week and then just joining. So even if that's going to a gym and you do group fitness classes, like join that, do that. You could make friends, go to a Bible study, do something where the other piece of this is consistency. So you need to be intentional and you have to have consistency because again, if you're jumping in, jumping out, it's going to be really challenging. So find something you love to do or you're interested in that has consistent meetings, join. That's it. And something will happen. Now, some people will make friends right away. Some it'll take a year. But just having that is going to help you feel less lonely.
And is there a different set of advice on that, whether it's introvert versus extrovert, or is it the same thing?
I think if you're introverted, it's harder.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, I think there's some of that. For me, I'm right on the line between introvert extrovert, and so it takes some energy, right, to go do that stuff. And I do some of those things, and I'm on the way, and I'm like, oh man, do I really want to do this? Is this really gonna? But that's that consistency piece where you just have to keep showing up. And eventually it gets easier. You build relationships. But yeah, I think for introverts, it's harder to do.
Yeah. Okay. Good. All right. So I want to transition now to just some conversation about just the counseling world in general.
Okay.
And a lot of times there is kind of a negative this negative stigma with it.
Okay.
So, and we all have a past. We're all products of our past.
Right.
And so, again, that's kind of the human condition. So if men struggle in the whole area of vulnerability, which often we do, how do we overcome the mental hurdle of thinking that if we go to counseling, something's wrong with us?
Okay. Well, so what if something is wrong with you, right? So I just meet people there and I just say, are there people who don't have something wrong in their life? Point them out. Who are they? I don't believe there are those people, right? And so we just kind of start there where it's like in any other thing, if you wanted help, if you're an athlete and you want to be better, they hire coaches, trainers, like there's nothing wrong with that. But this is actually the stuff like kind of pulling the strings. So is it a bad thing to say like I got help and I function better in my relationships? I don't think that's embarrassing. I think what we might have learned is that to get help is not a thing to be seen, in a proud way. But what's also true is that the people who do that, they're a lot happier. And so we kind of just have to decide, do we want to stick to that stigma or take a step into what could be?
Mm-hmm. Where do you think that stigma originally just came from?
I think for some people, there's a faith component. For some people, I sometimes hear my church is against counseling or they don't support that. I think also just you shouldn't tell people your problems. I think there's all those things.
Pride.
Pride. And man, I get all of that. I think anytime someone sits in front of me, I feel honored that they're sharing that with me because it's a big ask. It takes a lot to sit there. But they're better for it. And so I get there's a stigma, but to me, it's just like it's a small price to pay often.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. And that's one way, obviously, to kind of care for our own mental health and just our own person. But in our world right now, there is no shortage of negativity.
Right.
There is no shortage of polarizing topics and strife and struggle. So, and I know that you've been, and I want to talk a little bit about your Instagram videos here shortly as well, but even in some of your Instagram videos, you've talked about, some of this type of thing. But how do we, especially for guys, how do we care for ourselves and care for our mental health in a world that is highly pressurized right now, very polarized, negative, argumentative, grumbly, pick all those words, right?
Right.
How do we just take care of ourselves in this world today?
Yeah. So I think it really comes down to knowing what you need. And we all need something different. But knowing what we need allows us to focus on that and eliminate the rest where we don't have time for it. And so the thing is, most of us don't need a lot of social media. It's really not actually a need. But we need quiet, or we need to get outside, or we need those things. So I think identifying what you need and then spending time working on that. The problem is, for most of us, we just chase what we want. And we get a lot of what we want, and that gives us comfort, and it's coping, but it's a poor substitute for what we need. And so I think as men, we just have to start saying, what actually do I need? And how do I ask for it? Because that's the other kind of difficult part is some of us feel like we can't ask for it. So if we do know what we need, goodness, if I asked for that, that would mean what? X, Y, Z. And so knowing what you need and how to ask for it.
So the needs, it's interesting you bring up the whole, we gravitate towards things we want versus needs, right? And I mean, I just remember even thinking about with our kids, it's just yes, I know we all want these things, but it's a needs versus want. So it's like teaching your kids how to manage money. I remember when my boys were, got their first jobs and all of a sudden they start realizing that all the stuff in their closet and that they need for school or whatever, it actually costs money.
Right.
And
that's a terrible realization. I hate that realization. Yeah.
And that there's always way more things that they want than they have money that can provide. And teaching them that sometimes you really have to evaluate and saying, look, it's not bad to want this thing. Maybe.
Not at all.
Maybe. Maybe it is, but I mean, you got to evaluate that.
Sure.
But it can't be about what you want. It's about what you need. You really want this, ice cream cone, but is that going to really, satisfy like this meal or whatever it is? I mean, depending on your age of your kids. So the needs versus want idea on what you're talking about in caring for yourself is what would be, so for guys, saying, hey, we want this, but I need this. So beyond the social media piece, I'm just trying to make it practical for guys.
I'll just use something for me. So I want to watch a movie a week or something. Would be great, watch Netflix for a while. But what I need to do is I need to go to the gym 3 times a week. And the reason I need to do it is because I feel better, I feel healthier, and it changes my mindset. And so that might not be what I want, right? When I get up early in the morning and it's cold outside or warm outside or whatever it is, that might not be the want that I have, but it's the need that I know I need. And so kind of being able to parse that out, we can go after what we want, but just realize true gratitude comes from what we need, not what we want.
Yeah. You did a Instagram video just recently, actually, that I watched that about what causes us to feel rest and how do we rest. And it was interesting because I remember each year I try to go away for about 4 or 5 days. I take my Bible, some books. I disconnect from pretty much everything except from Laura and my kids, and I'll text them or talk to them once a day or whatever. But it's just kind of a spiritual retreat. And I remember the first time I did it, I was like, this is going to make me feel rest.
Okay.
This is going to, when I go, I'm just going to feel rest. But it actually made me feel a little bit of anxiety because I wasn't, wasn't doing like what I normally do, you know?
Right.
And actually what really makes me feel rested is going to the gym or going on some sort of like not sitting, sitting still makes me feel rest, which is really weird, Jason. Okay. But at any rate, that kind of speaks a little bit to even just, what do you enjoy? Like because when we're doing things we enjoy, when we're serving other people, when we're not just focused on ourselves, all those kinds of things can help us in our, just our mental health type of mentality or that's about mental health and mentality all in one sentence, but just in our space as well. But it's knowing how you do those things for you. And sometimes that's a journey to figure that out.
Yeah, and we have to try. I mean, some of us learn, we just are creative, we can come up with ideas. Others of us, we have to rule things out. And there's really no one better than the other. So maybe you're a person that says, well, I know what I need and I just come up with it. Oh, that's awesome. But most of us are like, I don't know what I need and I need to rule some things out. So then you just try some stuff and just realize like sometimes it's going to work really well and other times it won't.
Yeah. Yeah. It was funny because the second time I went, I did it 2 years in a row. I went to like this, some friends. Once I went to a lake house and got snowed in.
Okay.
14 inches of snow.
Wow.
Couldn't leave for like forever. And then the next year I went to Cabin and Spearfish, like 20 inches of snow, and I couldn't leave. I mean, it was like 2 years in a row, whatever.
Wow.
And the second year I did it, I just was like, I don't know if this is for me. I just don't know if this is like how I even process and all of that. But it was that exploration of trying to figure out how best, I can take care of myself and minister to my needs, so that it's effective,
right.
and it's an efficient use of my time and not come back disappointed and say, well, that didn't really help me at all.
Right. Yeah, you have to try it out. And I do something similar where I'll take like 2 days and go out to the Black Hills. I like to bike and I like to fly fish. So I'll bike and fly fish.
At the same time?
Yeah, same time. I catch a lot of fish that way. We call it trolling. No, I'll bike and then I'll stop and I'll fly fish. And I'll put on like 60 or 70 miles. And the thing is like I'm exhausted, but in those 2 days I feel great. Now 3 days would probably be too much. If I wasn't doing something, I'd be lonely. So it's like I've kind of figured out the most efficient way to work that, and it just works.
Yeah.
But I got to tell you, like the first time I asked for that, and I said like, hey, to my wife, I said like, hey, I think I need to do this. It felt really weird. I mean, I felt like, who are you to be asking for this?
Right.
The whole way I'm driving out there, I'm feeling guilty because I'm like, well, why should I be getting what I need right now? But what the reality is that when I do that, I can show up better for my family and at work, and so we find out what we need and we do it.
Right. And it's not like you're taking 2 days a week to do that.
Oh, I didn't mention that part. Yeah, I mean, that's 2 days a week. Yes, it's 2 days a week. I enjoy it a lot.
It's every weekend.
Yeah, every weekend. I feel great though. Yeah.
But no, it's obviously it's a very focused time, and it's not just like, yeah, that's funny. All right, so let's talk about your Instagram videos, because I know that this is something that you've been doing a lot more of now. And sharing, short form videos, not very long, but just like nice food for people's soul, like some helps and some tricks and tips of the trade, that kind of stuff, of just different subjects. So tell me just how you started doing those, why you started doing them, and then I want to talk about some of the content of some of them.
Sure. Well, I received an overwhelming number of emails from people asking for me to just put my face out there every day.
Right.
So that was really the first problem.
That was really the impetus for starting it.
Because I was like, well, this is my 5,000th email today of people that want to see this. No, actually, one of my commitments that I made in 2021 was to help 1,000 people. And so I don't know how I was going to do that. I had some ideas, and I decided that might be part of it. And so as part of that, I'm just putting them out there, and I'm hoping somehow it helps 1,000 people.
Right.
2022, I want to help 10,000 people. So I don't know how that's going to work yet, but my goal is just to help people if it's helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I've listened to many of them, and
Cool.
I've found the vast majority of them helpful. So,
thanks.
I mean,
That's
I don't
great.
know if I get counted multiple times.
I think you get multiple counts. Yeah. I need to make the goal this year, so you're getting counted like 100. Yep.
Okay,
Thank
perfect.
you.
Good. That's great. I'll watch them again. I'll just keep going that count up. All right. So let's talk about some of the topics and some of the content that you've been putting out there. So what's been one or two of them that seems to just generated the most? I mean, I hate to use likes because it just seems like, like our world is so focused on, well, this one got a lot of likes, so this one must have been really good. Or,
Right.
And I hate that's the way that's kind of our world has turned into, where we just live for likes. But like, which one has you gotten some feedback for to say, hey, Jason, that was really helpful?
Yeah, I think the ones that I get the feedback for are how do we have difficult conversations? How do we deal with things that aren't comfortable? How do we be intentional about our lives?
Yeah.
When I started it, I thought, well, I'll just talk about like really all this philosophical stuff and people will love it. And no one likes those ones. They're all like, oh, those are terrible. Yeah. And then we really like this practical one. And so I think what I'm learning is just like people like it when you meet them where they're at. And it's just, it's typical real world, day-to-day stuff. How do I have tough conversations? How do I deal with a relationship that I might be struggling with? How do I face, what I'm doing versus where I want to be? Those are the ones that I've seen a lot of response from.
Okay.
The other ones, there's like 2 people that like those,
Okay.
but there's the
Your
other
mom
ones. Yeah.
And
Good old mom's clicking on it.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So just give us an example of one of them, and don't worry, I have a feeling that your video count's going to go way up when this episode drops. But just give me kind of an idea of like, okay, so you talked about the difficult conversations one. So give me some of the meat of that, or any other one that you choose to give me, but something.
Yeah. So a difficult conversation one, what I try to teach people is what I teach them when we're having a session. So like a formula I have for a difficult conversation is going into it with one sentence of what you want to talk about. Okay. So if I'm in my relationship, we both agree on that one sentence, right? We're going to talk about sending the kids to private school, let's say. Okay. And so then what I need to know is what are my wants about that conversation and what are my needs? Okay. So my wants are to get my way. They'll go to a private school, let's say, right? But what my need is they can go to public school, but I want you to understand it's important to me that we look at the education to make sure it works. Okay. So we go in with one sentence we agree on. So we both know what we're talking about. Because again, I'm a simple guy and I'll lose track otherwise. Then we talk about what I want and then what I need. And the reality is that I might not get what I want. We can honor that. And if I get it, that's super awesome. But I at least need to get what I need. And so that might just be understanding. Might say like, hey, I want you to agree with me, but what I really need is you to understand where I'm coming from. Mm-hmm. I don't have to agree with it. I just need you to understand.
Yeah. And regardless how that comes out,
right,
at least there's been understanding. You could be a little bit upset maybe.
Yeah,
that doesn't mean that you don't have some emotional like, oh, I'm bummed that it didn't work out the way I wanted. Yep. But at least I felt heard.
Right.
And I felt understood.
Right. Yeah, because otherwise we walk into those things and my sentence for what we're talking about might be different than yours. Mm-hmm. And so we're having 2 different conversations and we both have wants and needs that are very different and not related to what we're talking about.
Right. Which is a posture then that you also need to be offering to others as they're bringing you the difficult conversation topic that they want to discuss.
Right. Yeah. And we want to meet him there. And we, I don't know about you, but I've been in arguments where halfway through, I'm not sure what we're arguing about anymore. And that's a really terrible feeling when I'm like, I'm so mad, but I don't know why. Yeah. I wish you could, I don't even know anymore. And so I just want it to be like an agreed upon sentence where we're like, yeah, if we're having conflict, it's because this is what we're talking about, and this is what you think, want, and need, and this is where I'm at, and we're a ways apart.
Yeah, I think that makes me think of Jason also in some of the different kinds of counseling and just different things that I've been involved in, and where it talks about how dealing with one thing at a time. And you said coming with the one sentence keeps you focused on that, so that it doesn't rabbit trail into to like, oh, and this, and then what about this? Right. Because I'm actually like a professional at that. Whereas like, okay, we started talking about this issue, but then all of a sudden now we're talking about, oh yeah, but then you also did this last week, and this is the, and it's like we got
You're like a magician. You just pull out something new, and they're like, oh, I didn't know we were talking about that. You're like, but wait, and you do it again.
There's more, But the best conversations and where the most understanding and resolution has come when you've been able to kind of stay on task and say, look, we may have a whole grocery list of things we need to discuss. We may have 10 things that we need to discuss, but tonight we're just going to talk about one.
Yep. And we'll stop when we get it resolved, and then we'll move on to the next one.
Yeah.
And if along the way we come up with other topics, right? So we say like, well, hey, I remembered you're actually a jerk. They're like, okay, that might be something to talk about, but like that's not the sentence, right? So that'll be maybe the next conversation is I'm a jerk, and we'll talk through that.
Right.
Or historical arguments will get brought into it. Yeah. And we'll say like, okay, that makes so much sense. Are we having a historical argument or we're having a current argument? Well, we're talking about this sentence. Well, that's historical then. We can talk about that next. Mm-hmm. So just keeping it really, really specific and then working to resolution. Right. And say at the end, like, did we actually work through this?
Yeah.
Because the thing is, most of us never get to that place because we don't know what we're talking about.
Mm-hmm. And would you say the resolution word sometimes can... Like, does that mean that everything can be resolved?
Well, I think that resolved is different than agreeing, right? So I think, yes, it can be resolved. Yep. We might not get what we want, right? We might hopefully get what we need, but we might not get what we want. And so I think resolution comes from that place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, that's good. That's good. All right. Well, hey, we are, I think we covered a lot of ground today.
We did cover a lot. I think we solved the world's problems.
At least a few
we did some parenting.
Sure.
Like, we covered some ground. Yeah.
We talked about a lot of stuff. So at the end of my podcast, Jason, we always do something called the final word where I basically give, 30 to 60 seconds where you can just share, what it's kind of your final words of just whatever, encouragement, challenge, whatever you want to do with the listeners. But prior to doing that, I'd love for you just to kind of just share how do people connect with you? How do they find you online with your website and then your Instagram and so they can be tuning into these great teaching videos that you have, and they're not long. Okay, it's not like
like a minute or less.
Yeah, I mean they're.
I have
quick.
A very limited attention span, so it's very quick. Yep.
So tell them how they can find you.
Yeah, so Instagram I think is jason.vanruler, and you can link to that. Otherwise, my website's jasonvr.com, and so they can contact me that way too.
Okay, awesome. That's great. Well, I know that in addition to the counseling, you've got obviously like we talked about with the Instagram, you're also doing life coaching and all of that. So I just want to encourage any listeners that have had their interest piqued by our conversation today that Jason really is a great dude to talk with. And you got a lot of wisdom for a young guy. You've been doing counseling for over 10 years or just about 10 years. And I think it seems like you've been doing it for like 20. Because,
thank you.
Because you're just so good at it.
I'm more just honored you said I was a young guy. I'm really, I'll take that. I don't care about any of the rest. It's just great.
But the age of your kids, they're younger than my kids. I just feel old. You know what I mean? And we're and
I didn't want to say anything.
Yeah, and for those of you that are listening and not watching, I mean, we also are wearing matching gray sweaters today. That was unplanned.
It's a good look. I think you should adopt it.
And I forgot that I was actually doing podcasts when I did my whole facial hair restructuring. So like you're one of the first people to see this mustache.
I love it. So, I would say keep it.
All right, my friend. Well, hey, we've come to the end of our episode together. So 30 to 60 seconds. We call it the final word. What's your final word for listeners today?
Yeah, I think I would just say you're not alone. I think so many people feel a lot like they're alone. And there are definitely problems that are unique, but at the same time, they're often shared with others. And so if you're feeling alone, just know you're probably not. And then talk to somebody about that. I think for whatever reason, we might feel like it's wrong to talk to somebody or it's scary, but taking that risk is always going to pay off. And so I think when you can do that and you can kind of figure out like who you are, what you need, and we start to do more of that, life can just get so much brighter. But I would just say, like, I've never met anyone where I could not understand the function of a behavior. Like, wherever you're at, whatever you're doing, whatever the problem is, the thing that underpins that is something legitimate. And so just know whatever that struggle is, like, there's a legitimate need there, and someone can help you get that met in a healthy way. And when you can figure that out and ask somebody to do it, like, you'll start to have connection and life will look brighter.
That's great, Jason. Well, I really appreciate you stopping by. Thanks for being just a tremendous guest here on the Giving Life podcast. And I have a feeling that your Instagram viewership is going to go way up, my friend.
Okay.
All right. Thanks for being here.
All right. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Jason VanRuler today. As always, if you found this episode helpful, I encourage you to share with others that may find it helpful as well. If you'd like to connect more with Jason, be sure to visit jasonvr.com or connect with him on Instagram at jason.vanruler. Don't forget to also check out his podcasts, Okay, What's Next, and the Inner Process podcast on Apple Pods or on Spotify. All right, thanks again for joining me today, everybody. We'll see you next time for another episode of ResGen's Giving Life podcast. Until then, continue being men whose life in Christ gives life to others.